my main thought is this is all bullshit. Any way you look at it, I think from any angle, it's bullshit. The way he said it, it was not a like.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, it was not a like New York, like a Brooklyn, like a Jersey kind of thing. It was.
He's from Atoka.
Yeah, it was this here bullshit.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, he's not wrong. The whole thing is bullshit. Let's not think about the worst case scenario because it's all on fire right now. Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I am one of your hosts.
I'm Scott Nelson. I'm one of your hosts.
We are the hosts.
The hosts.
This is all you get is us.
This is the pod.
Not just today. Today we have some interviews with regular everyday people, which we'll get to in just a few minutes. So we're recording this on Thursday as the Senate JCAB meets.
It is Thursday. It is Thursday at 4:39, and that is important because at 4:49 there may be something entirely new and unanticipated that has happened.
If there's one thing we've learned this week, it's that things can change every minute.
It's been one of those weeks. It's I think the week started with the potential for kind of a flurry of activity. I think a lot of people were saying they felt like this was going to be the week that if anything was going to happen, like it was going to be now, and then really the speed has just kind of picked up every day that's gone by for been rapid developments. It's
been a rough week, and so maybe a good place to start is to jump back in where we left off last week, and that was last week. The Capitol was closed, nothing was happening, there was no one there, the power was off, and they came back, and we knew they were going to come back this week, and Monday's always kind of a wash because they've got to allow time for rural folks to get into the city, and so they usually do something in the afternoon, some committee meetings.
Galvin like 1 or 2 or something.
Yeah, and then we knew that it was going to be a big rally Tuesday morning.
I wonder, actually. I wasn't able to go with work, but I was kind of looking at Facebook posts and texts from folks that were there. I don't know if people anticipated how big this was going to be.
No, I don't think so. It was the biggest rally that I've seen at the Capitol.
I mean, lines of like 30, 45 minutes just to get in. Mm-hmm. I had 2 legislators tell me that they think they spoke with probably 100 people. Mm-hmm. Like hundreds of people lined up in their offices advocating, for or events, for or against kind of what's, the package that was being offered.
Yeah, so I think from my observation, so I arrived early. I got there at about 8:45 because I knew that it would be busy and I wanted a parking spot, mostly. But I didn't know that it was going to be that busy. And yeah, by 9:20, the 4th floor of the rotunda was full. Mm-hmm. All the seats were taken. People were standing around the edges. And the 5th floor, kind of overlooking it, started to fill up. And then at some point, I know that they blocked off the elevators. Some of the troopers were there. There was a lot of troopers there. And they blocked off people from going to the 4th and 5th floor and made them go on 2nd and 3rd. And then really for hours, there was, even as the crowd began to thin out, they moved the speakers outside, like the PA system, and tried to encourage folks to go outside. And people started filling the halls and doing office visits. There wasn't really much of a rally as far as speakers go. I think Joe Dorman spoke and a couple other folks that I don't even know. And the acoustics in there are so terrible, you can't really hear anything. People clapped and cheered, and that was about it.
For a place designed to be a public forum, it's a really bad place to have a public forum.
Well, right. Yeah, it is good for seeing things, and that honestly was the biggest crowd I've seen. Also, the Behavioral Health Association of Tulsa, I think, was organizing it, and I believe they're the ones that brought some green hats. They had green hats made. Nice. I've not seen hats before.
No, that was new.
But I think what we're doing is we're building the advocate's wardrobe, right? So now I've got a hat. I've got a Let's Fix This t-shirt, plenty of buttons. I've got a life vest. If someone wants to make maybe some like shorts or some socks, maybe we need some socks. I don't know what the options are.
And it's important that depending on you, especially when it comes to I can't speak for the green hats or the pink hats, honestly, but when it comes to your let's fix this advocacy wardrobe, you can wear that anywhere. I mean, the shirts, they're nice, they're soft, they're comfortable, they're stylish. I have multiple t-shirts.
Do you really?
I do. I have multiple. I have one that I explicitly and expressly wear to the gym, where I feel like it has multiple connotations.
Right.
Like on the one hand, big picture, let's fix this, but also looking at me, let's fix this.
So when you're flexing in the mirror and you're trying to remind yourself of like, I'm working on me
I'm
the
fixing
state.
it.
That's, you're not the first person to say they wear their t-shirt to the gym, which is interesting. Okay, so I think let's start with talking about what happened Monday, and that was the governor's press conference where she announced a revenue package.
Yeah. So it actually, irony is a funny thing. We had former minority leader Inman a few weeks ago. We'll get to the former here in a few minutes. A few weeks ago, I had a press conference where he announced a budget deal, and then immediately afterwards was like, all of this pushback from the governor's office, from Republicans in both the House and the Senate. No. There's no deal. There's no wedding when there's only one person at the altar, right?
Right.
Well, so Monday, Governor Fallon, along with Speaker McCall, Pro Tem Schultz, came out and had a press conference where they announced a budget deal, and it was like immediately after, all of the Democrats were going, when you say deal, do you mean that you guys have put together a framework for revenue that you think is appropriate but will not be able to pass either house without the support of our caucuses? Because that's what it sounds like.
Which, to be fair, that's actually a big deal because the House and Senate and the governor's office, none of the three of those have gotten along, even within the same party.
Yeah, they've not been on the same page.
Maybe
at
we
all.
sold them short that took some negotiation to get to that point.
Fair enough. A not insignificant accomplishment. But it did feel a little bit like, hey, look, we finally got all of us that are supposed to live under the same roof. We are all in agreement. So here's where we're at. Take it or leave it. This is what's happening.
Right.
And I think that for reasons, that are not clear to me, I think they expected the Dems to be like, okay, fine, I guess we'll do that.
Which I don't know why they expect that from either party. No one should expect the other side just to roll over.
No.
Come on, this is 2017. Clearly,
Right.
at this stage in the United States history, that's not how this works.
Well, and they're both, and this is, I'm not saying that either side is right from the policy perspective, but from a political perspective, both caucuses and in both houses, they have way too much invested at this point to just cave, right?
I mean,
they have come this far, towing the firm line. It's like, what do you think? I'm just gonna roll over now?
Right. If they were going to agree that easily, they would have done it in May, and
Right.
we wouldn't be in this position. There's no reason they should agree on this stuff anymore than I should expect my children to be ready when I say, hey, we've got to leave in 5 minutes.
Right.
They're not going to be ready in 5 minutes.
Right. It's like you need to leave the house at 7:45. You start telling them that at 7:15. Right?
At least.
Like,
right. The night before.
Right. There you go. Well, so the specific package they put out, several components: fuel tax, 6 cent per gallon fuel tax, $1.50 per pack cigarette tax,
The beer tax.
beer tax on 3.2 beer, which only is going to exist for like another year.
Right. Because right now, 3.2 beer is just a sales tax. It's considered a grocery item, and so it doesn't have a separate liquor tax like High Point beer, liquor, wine, all that does. And it's like a 15 point something percent. So it would just, next year when the laws change, it'll all be considered alcohol, and it'll all be the 15%. They're just speeding that up a little bit.
Additionally, there was a restoration of the earned income tax credit, which is a little bit kind of into the weeds to talk about what that is. But essentially, it's a tax credit that predominantly benefits folks that are at the lower end of the income spectrum.
And you have to be working. It's for
Right.
working adults that make under a certain level, and it's a deduction or a tax credit when you file your taxes. It's a federal credit. It's also a state credit.
Right.
And in 2016, they removed the piece that was like made it refundable, which means it capped how much you could claim.
Right, exactly. So a restoration of the EITC and a $1,000 across-the-board raise for state employees and a $3,000 across-the-board raise for teachers. It's important to know because this is the reason I say it's important is because it's a big difference in how much this costs. This was a $3,000 guaranteed raise for every teacher in the state, not a $3,000 increase to the minimum salary.
Right. It's just a big bump moves everybody up, which is good.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's when you start slicing and dicing down on that, there's a lot that could change.
Right.
Today, I met with some people from New York and California and Boston. It was some of the board members for an organization called Generation Citizen, which is they do civics education for high school students. Great organization, and they recently expanded to Oklahoma last year, and they were asking a lot of questions about Oklahoma politics, and you could see them all like asking really serious, like interested questions, and they were fascinated by the history of Oklahoma up to this point, and wondered like, why do we do the things we do? And I was like, well, you see, Oklahomans don't like government ever, any level, and it's tough to govern at all levels.
Yeah.
So.
Ashley and I, we recently were on vacation out of the country. We were in Canada, in Vancouver.
Hey.
If you've never been to Vancouver, you should go. Everyone should go.
I hear it's wonderful.
It's fantastic.
Really lush and gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
Much like my hair.
A different kind of lush. No,
Yes.
It's not more or less lush. It's just different. No, beautiful scenery, amazing people, great food. But it was kind of funny though, because everywhere we went, people would say, "Oh, you're from the States," and we'd say, "Yeah," and they say, "Where are you from?" We'd say Oklahoma, and I mean 9 times out of 10, we just kind of got this look like, "Oh, that's
in the middle.
That's interesting."
Right. I don't know where that is.
Isn't that one of the? That's one of the really, really red places, right?
Right above
Yes.
Texas.
Yes,
oh,
yes.
sure.
Yeah,
That's
right.
as someone who's from Texas. Here, I will say, you can go to any country in the world and say you're from Texas, and they know where that's from.
Is that because all the people from Texas are jackasses?
Hey, now. Not all of us. Only some of us.
Well, we're getting somewhat sidetracked here, which is entirely my fault. I think it's this was the deal air quotes that was announced on Monday, revenue package. My initial thought was, okay, we're supposed to be raising money for the budget hole. Again, as we know from previous discussions, I'm not so great at the new math, but restoration of the earned income tax credit, a $1,000 teacher pay raise, and a $3,000 a $1,000 state employee raise and $3,000 teacher pay raise, those all seem like things that would cost money, potentially a significant amount of money. So what the hell, right? How are we're already short and getting shorter every day because every day that we're not collecting revenue because of the unconstitutionality of these measures, like every day that goes by, we need more to make up the whole. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And now we're spending more on top of it. What's the, I don't see how the math works out. The short answer is that the math actually doesn't work out. But I engaged with some folks on social media this week kind of asking this question, like, hey, is anybody asking what the hell? Like, where's this going? And the short answer is that the revenue that will come from the measures that are in the bill, so taxes on cigarettes, taxes on alcohol, and a fuel tax, is going to be combined, or the thought was that it's going to be combined with what's called carryover funds that are unanticipated monies left over from the last fiscal year, as well as some funds like $83 million or something from the rainy day fund. And together, that whole package would kind of fund the whole, plus the teacher pay raise and the state employee raise. The unspoken part of this is that it still would require cuts to some agencies, like 17% cuts.
17?
Not 17%, 17 million in cuts that have to come
spread out across all the agencies, which would be a tiny amount.
And still leaves us, though, with a significant hole for next year because this doesn't fund any of this stuff for next year.
And I don't know there's a way to avoid that based on, well, there's plenty of ways to avoid it, but none based on what they're proposing. So
noticeably absent from this proposal was any increase in the gross production tax on oil and natural gas.
Right, which has been a hot button issue. But it's not the only option. I just want to say this real quick.
Absolutely.
GPT, gross production tax, has been the issue that everyone keeps talking about, and the Republicans are sick of hearing about it, and I think the Democrats are sick of saying it. But it's not the only thing. Like, there's also the repeal of, like, the capital gains exemption. They could
$100 million right there.
They could add they could do the combined corporate reporting, which hasn't been discussed in special session. It was discussed back in May.
Income taxes.
They could reinstate the previous income tax rate for all of us.
Which arguably, regardless
what
of
got us into this mess in the first place.
Well, what got us into this mess, and regardless of kind of where you sit politically on oil and gas, and when I say where you sit politically, I mean from an environmental perspective, from a tax perspective, corporate welfare, regardless of all of that, it is a really, I think, easy to make the policy case that income taxes are a better way to address the shortfall that we face than GPT.
Because GPT is more
so variable.
Yeah,
it's volatile. I mean, it's
Yes.
not so volatile. I mean, it is of the ways that you could try to address this shortfall. It is a much more volatile revenue stream than income tax.
Right, because if something goes sideways with North Korea, gas prices are going to change almost instantly.
Right.
Think about when 9/11 happened. Suddenly, people were gouging everyone at the pump. Like, things change.
Right.
Not that prices at the
the
pump affect
Ar-
GPT, but
Iran deal. Anyone heard of the Iran deal?
or when Saudi Arabia goes public with Saudi Aramco, which is their it's a initial public offering, IPO.
Biggest oil company in the world. Our biggest company in the world.
Yeah, and it'll be the largest IPO in history. When that happens, that's going to have a huge impact on markets, and so we'll just see. Anyway, what you're saying is income tax, that's not across the board, is
And again,
pretty stable.
regardless of the politics, that's arguably a better policy.
They could, we are due for income tax reform in a major way in Oklahoma. They could really structure it so that it's graduated so that lower incomes pay a lower percentage and higher incomes pay a higher percentage, which most people feel is fair. Even folks at higher income are like, I don't want to pay more, but I get that, like, I make $280,000. Maybe I should pay a little bit more, proportionally.
Which is not a new idea, by the way. Like, I love to hear from people that, like, oh my gosh, this is what all these new leftist liberals want, a progressive income tax. No, actually go back, read Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, Scotland, 87, I think. Read the book. It's in there. Progressive income tax. Literally the father of capitalism said that this is how the tax structure should work.
Did you say 1787?
I think so.
So back at the very, very beginning. All right. So also what happened earlier this week was the big rally on Tuesday. So after the kind of budget deal, quote, agreement on Monday, that really gave people something to advocate for or against. And so Tuesday there was this rally at the Capitol that was organized by the Behavioral Health Association of Oklahoma. We might have even mentioned it last week in the podcast. And there were so many people that there were tons of folks I knew that I didn't see. I just saw their photos later that they were there, and I thought, that's crazy. And so I stood on the 5th floor for a lot of it and kind of watched people milling around on the 4th floor. Saw a lot of legislators talking to people down there. And what was interesting was that you could overhear conversations, and there were a lot of folks that had never been to the Capitol before. That's always interesting to me. But
good for them. Right?
Yeah, for sure. And the other deal is that everyone's there for the same reason, right? Everyone wants to protect funding, and they want no cuts to the Department of Mental Health, no cuts to DHS, and no cuts to Medicaid. And a lot of those things kind of intersect. But after that piece of agreement, people didn't necessarily agree on what to do. And that's why we're in this position, is that I think legislators are in a tough spot, right? There's a lot of folks that are low income that receive mental health services, and they have very low income, and they don't want to pay more for cigarettes. They don't want to pay more for gas because it's a bigger percentage of their income. And so there were, I didn't survey everybody, but I felt like there were almost equal numbers of people advocating for and against this budget plan. Most people were for it, I think, because they're like, this is the only option out there. You've got to support this to not have cuts. But a lot of people also didn't. They want the budget hole to be filled, but not this way.
Right. That's definitely the sense that I get. From, again, looking at social media, and then again talking to some legislators in the last 24 hours. I think that, one, they were surprised by the number of people. Two, I think they were surprised at how evenly divided. I mean, I talked to a couple, to two in particular, that I think went into Tuesday having heard the revenue proposal and were kind of set on their position.
Right.
This is how I feel about this. And then met with, hundreds of people on Tuesday, some their direct constituents, some not, and left those meetings thinking, wow, like, I really need to be, I need to think about this more. It doesn't necessarily change my mind, but it's got me thinking about it. It's got me thinking, that I need to switch this way, or I need to switch that way, which I thought was interesting, and is a testament to the fact that, the power of the people is a real thing. Like, you go up there and they listen, and it matters. you can change their minds. And I know meeting with 100 people sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but when you're talking to people who represent 30 or 40,000 Oklahomans, I mean, 100 that's a fraction, right?
Right.
Like a fraction of a district can sway an opinion
Right.
in a way that matters.
Right. And I mean, it was really pretty encouraging to see so many people lining the halls, not being jerks about it either, just being like, hey, I want you to support this or not support this, or just fix the hole or something.
Right.
And the deal is, like, not everyone has the same level of understanding or knowledge or expertise, but they've got passion, and that's the part that's kind of exciting. Like, and that's, I mean, I think that's kind of what we at Let's Fix This try to do, is to help people who are passionate, even those who are dispassionate, help them find their passion. But, like, come and be like, what do you care about? Why do you care about it? Okay, here's what's out there, and, like, help them understand a little bit more about what's going on. And so I had several conversations I was talking to a woman who was there for the first time, and she said she'd been there for 30 minutes and her chest was still pounding because she was anxious about being in the Capitol. And she kind of felt like she was going to get in trouble or doing the wrong thing. And I was like, no, like, you own the building. This is our place. This is the people's house. And she really just opened up about her story of being involved with DHS and mental health services and struggles within her own family, her and her husband, and abuse and how things had kind of gone on, and the real value she found. It was actually a really positive story about DHS, which you don't hear often. And I was like, man, let's go find your legislator, because they need to hear this very important, very personal story about how the system is working as it's supposed to. And
did you record any of this conversation?
No, because it was I talked to her afterwards and asked her, and
right.
But she had really just divulged, and it was I mean, it was honestly really personal. And I talked to a few other folks that we'll hear in just a minute, but it was an honor to kind of hear her story and be like, you know what, like, let's go find your person, because you just told three strangers, and we were all so cool. We're all therapists, which is probably why she opened up. But
I mean, we love to reference. We love to reference West Wing and West Wing Weekly on this show. I mean, this brings to mind, there's an episode in the first season, I want to say it's episode 3 or 4. Yes, I watched too much West Wing. When Charlie, who becomes the body man to the president, shows up for the first time, and he's watching the president give a press conference in the Oval Office. And one of the other characters, Josh Lyman, leads up to him and says, hey, man, this feeling you have right now, like, it doesn't go away.
Right.
I've never watched a president give a press conference in the Oval Office, so I can't say I know what that feels like. But I think that feeling of, like, at least for me, and it's not anxiety so much anymore, but that feeling of, like, of going to the Capitol, like, talking with, legislators, talking with lobbyists, and feeling like I'm, having an impact. Like, for me, that feeling doesn't go away. In fact, it gets better every time I go. And to hear someone else, like, to hear that story of someone going for the first time and really just opening themselves up in this incredibly vulnerable place in spite of all that. Like, I don't know who her legislator is. I don't know what she talked about. I don't know what she said to them, but man, I hope that for her, that's a feeling that doesn't go away and only gets better.
She said afterwards that she felt like her legislator listened to her and really was kind of, he took time to listen to her and hear her story and give some good feedback, which is also encouraging. And the other thing that I think is really cool just about us, and I'm always amazed at all of our events, almost every time we have about half of the group is there for the very first time. We get some repeat folks that come back because they want to be, like, kind of involved, but every time. And I kept expecting there to be, like, a diminishing returns, but I always have people raise their hands, and always half the group was like, no, it's my first time. And so for me to get to, like, meet them and say, thank you so much for coming, what can I do to help you show up is truly an honor. So maybe on that note, let's shift over, take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to listen to some interviews that I did with people that were there at the rally on Tuesday. The Behavioral Health Association of Oklahoma organized a rally this week on Tuesday at the Capitol for advocates and people that are receiving services funded by the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, by DHS, and by Sooner Care, which is Oklahoma's Medicaid program. And so I took the day off work to go to the state capitol to visit with some of these representatives, some of these consumers that are directly affected by these services, and to see what their sentiment was, what they're talking to legislators about, what they're feeling, what they're hearing, and maybe what they're hoping to see happen. When I first arrived at the Capitol, I went up to the 5th floor to kind of overlook the rotunda and watch as people arrived, kind of see the crowd filling in. And while I was up there, I ran into a familiar face.
Michelle Hastings. I'm a supervisor with Child Welfare.
I first met Michelle several months ago at the OU School of Social Work when I spoke to her class where she was pursuing her MSW. And I wanted to find out what brought her to the Capitol during this rally.
I'm here today to hopefully encourage and influence our legislators to come up with a reasonable and achievable budget plan, because I think that the cuts to mental health services and those related are terrifying. In my household, we represent not only child welfare but also law enforcement, and I think that that is terrifying to both disciplines. I think those related to child abuse, we could all agree on, but I think even in the bigger picture, that the potential for more volatile exchanges between law enforcement and the untreated mentally ill are going to be tragic and impact our state in a way that none of us want to see. And it concerns me then that the discipline of law enforcement is going to be held accountable for that, unfortunately, because that's who's seen, instead of all of the impacts and the cuts that we're potentially facing.
Having worked in the mental health field here in Oklahoma for about 15 years, I expected I might see a number of familiar faces today, and that definitely held true throughout the morning. After I spoke with Michelle, I went downstairs to the 4th floor when the crowd was really growing to a pretty significant size, and I ran into another familiar face.
Paula Porter, President and CEO for Woven Life Intergenerational Learning and Care. I am here on behalf of Services for Children and Adults with Disabilities. Our Adult Day are in major peril right now. We're at the risk of losing all of our funding from DHS, so that would affect about 30% of our Adult Day population. There are only 27 adult days in the state of Oklahoma, and many of those will be forced to close down, forcing citizens into nursing homes. Families will be forced to lose their jobs. You probably would even have some deaths from this. You have people who really have no other means and no other place to go, and this is their only hope at independence.
I asked Michelle and Paula both what they, as constituents, as voters, what they thought should happen and what they felt like their legislators needed to hear from them.
I think that we should look at, honestly, I think we need to look at engaging and holding more responsible the energy partners in our state. Instead of impacting, again, those who are maybe lesser fiscally apt, then they need to be a part of the solution and not be excluded from responsibility.
For the representatives in the district that represent Woven Life, so that's our people, I would say please find revenue. Please find revenue. I don't care what your options are, for God's sakes. Just find revenue and protect our services, protect our people, protect Oklahomans, and know that if you don't think this is going to affect you, this will affect you somehow. It may not affect you right now personally, but it will. It will affect you somehow. So you may as well buck up and find some revenue.
When I asked her what she felt about the rally itself, Paula had some really positive words.
Amazing. Oklahomans are amazing, and they know that there are options out there, and they're pleading, begging people to listen. Oklahomans are amazing, and we care about our people, we care about our services, and this is probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
With the crowd size in the thousands, not everyone could fit in the Capitol, so I went outside to see who was hanging around.
Jo Beth Hammond, Education Coordinator at Mental Health Association, Oklahoma.
So today's been the big rally here at the Capitol. What'd you think?
It was a really great turnout. It was nice to see so many people show up. It just is sort of unfortunate that we had to get to this kind of level of crisis to have so many people bus in from rural areas or Tulsa to kind of come put pressure on legislators. And from most of the conversations I've had with people about what their conversations were, it was either that they weren't available and they just had to leave them a card saying, here's what I want you to do, or it was just people saying that they have to vote for this bill as is with nothing that really looks to the long term. It seems like it's all a stopgap.
Sure. What do you think the consequences would be if these revenue measures don't pass?
Some pretty bad stuff. I've heard from a lot of people that there are folks that they serve that they think will die or end up in jail or worse, prison. I know I was just talking with someone that works for drug courts in Lincoln County, and they're like, most of my people are sort of half joking but saying they're gonna beat the path because they got to get out. If they don't get to stay in drug court, that they're going to end up in prison, and it's just so many steps back for them.
What do you tell folks that are in that position? How do you guide them or instruct them with what they should say? That's a tough question.
Go for it, I guess. I mean, yeah, it's what do you tell people? I mean, there's just nothing to say. I honestly, most of those people don't probably even have the resources to actually do that, is the unfortunate thing. They don't have the resources to go to a different state to get better services. And they're trapped here because they're connected to these services that are just dwindling and are already overburdened. So there's just really nothing productive to say to them except that it sucks.
Man, that was so cool to listen to.
Yeah.
That was just, we sit here and we do the pod, and I love it because this is what I love to talk about.
You like podcasts.
And I do have a weird obsession with podcasts. But it's just so cool to hear other people talk about that they're passionate about this stuff too, why they're passionate about it, what they think, what they're advocating for. I mean, for me personally, from from my perspective, they're 100% right in what they're advocating for. I mean,
right.
To hear somebody who, a social worker who's married to a police officer talk about what the hell is this going to do?
Well, they see both sides of it.
Yeah, right. I love my husband and he's a great police officer, but he's not a mental health worker and we shouldn't ask him to do that.
Right.
And that's what we're asking him to do if we don't do this. Hearing about Adult Day, that program used to be called Easter Seals. I'm not going to repeat the new name of it, but I don't know if people realize, but if they lose their funding, she said that many of our adults, or most of them, would be forced into nursing homes. Most of their adults, that number equals 10,000 people, and forced into nursing homes means they would no longer be able to go to the center during the daytime. So because they need constant care, they would have to go to a nursing home where they can get it, a skilled nursing facility. Oh, by the way, if these cuts that we're talking about go through, those skilled nursing facilities won't exist anymore because they will not be able to stay open with a 9% Medicaid cut, because the vast majority of skilled nursing facilities accept patients who are on Medicaid. So that's going to be 10,000 people that literally have nowhere to go.
Right. And it really is a worst case scenario for this. I've known Paula for a number of years. She was someone I met on old Twitter, back when Twitter first started. When we just
Hey. As a relatively newcomer to the Twitterverse, I reject your attempts at segregating Twitter.
As I said the other day, back when Twitter, when we just made new friends instead of insulting strengers.
That was a great quote.
And that's really what happened. I have a lot of friends from that. But she works really hard, and for me, out of the 3 interviews, the one that I like the most, I think, is that piece at the end where she says she was so impressed that Oklahomans showed up for this rally, and that I think that shows the resolve and the grit that Oklahomans are known for since the Dust Bowl to now, and how we are resilient and we try to overcome
obstacles like our government.
Absolutely.
And that, as much as I do worry and I feel some doom and gloom on occasion, I think that kind of optimism is maybe that's the kind of things that we need to like just to stoke our fire to keep us going.
Absolutely. And it also reinforces both their comments and the number of people that showed up at the Capitol on Tuesday. You know, I think that we, let's fix this. I shouldn't say I think. I hope that we do provide some measure of inspiration for people. But I hope that even more than that, we help people realize that they're already passionate about this stuff.
Right.
Right? Like the thing, like, there are people that say, oh, I don't really care about politics. I don't really care about what happens. No, you really do. You just don't know it.
Well,
you just have to find the issue.
Right. So today I ran into local artist Jack Fowler today around lunchtime, and he was painting the window at Black Scintilla, a little retail store over in Midtown.
His Twitter feed cracks me up.
And so Jack, I think Jack's a misunderstood guy, but I really like him. I've known him for a few years, and he is someone that you kind of get what you pay for with him, and he's a straight shooter, which I appreciate. And I think he fancies himself a bit of a sage, and he said, "You know what? I appreciate what you're doing," and he's like, because you're doing something that Let's Fix This is trying to do something, and you're trying to get other folks to do something. He said he's a bit of a nihilist phase right now, where he's sometimes he doesn't care if it burns or if it lives. But
that's an easy place to be in Oklahoma right
that's
now.
exactly what I said. I was like, man, I get it. And so he's doing
I think I've said that the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's doing like an art installation on their window there, and he's like, you know what? He's like, I'll come out of it, but right now I appreciate folks like you that are trying to do something. I was like, well, I mean, it's not just me; it's a whole bunch of people, and we just haven't given up yet. And there's because the giving up is unconscionable. Like I get it, but like I just can't do it. And I think that I'm willing to bet that there were hundreds or thousands of other Oklahomans that are out there at home and they're complaining on Facebook or Twitter, or they're telling their spouse about it at night. They read the news story and they're super angry about it and they don't know what to do. And I'm here to tell you, like, you can be involved.
Absolutely.
You may not feel like your phone call or your email makes a difference, but I guarantee that it does, because no matter how much you hear, almost no one does this.
Right. Well, and the thing is, even if you don't, Andy, you and I, we follow this stuff obsessively.
Right. We're at the high end of being involved.
Yeah, and we do that because, I mean, one, we're passionate about the issues, but two, I know for me, this is just something that kind of from an almost kind of from a detached perspective, it just fascinates me. Like, I really enjoy it. But
for both
being
of us,
involved.
Go ahead. So I'll go first. For me, we both work in jobs where we see the impact on everyday regular Oklahomans.
Oh, absolutely.
Who don't have any awareness of what's going on.
Right.
But it impacts them so deeply, and you got to do something. Whatever you can, you've got way more power than you think you do.
Well, and I think that one thing that gets intimidated, that people get intimidated, is they say, oh, well, I mean, I can't be involved because I can't check my Twitter feed that often, or I don't want to have a Twitter feed, or I don't have time to make a podcast, or I don't have time to blog. You don't have to do any of that stuff. All you have to do is just show up and talk. Pick up the phone, send an email, show up to the Capitol one time. That's literally all you have to do, because I promise there are plenty of us who follow this stuff obsessively that can help you know what the impact is. If you have any doubt about the impact, I mean, just look at what's happened at the Capitol this week.
Right.
If you watch Speaker McCall's press conference on Wednesday, I mean, we've been in special session for 4 weeks, but that press conference yesterday, he was a different guy. And I'm not here to comment on good, bad, agree, disagree. I'm just saying, you look at the exchange he had with reporters, you look at the exchange that he had with Representative Williams. I mean, these guys are feeling the pressure. And I think that the pressure got turned up to another level after the rally on Wednesday.
I agree. And I think, one thing that's difficult, and I spoke with the board from Generation Citizen today. We had this conversation of someone asked, how does it different? Like, what's it like in rural Oklahoma versus, urban Oklahoma? And I thought, this guy's been here for like 5 minutes, and he already understands that this is a huge divide.
Absolutely.
And that the people in Atoka from Speaker McCall's district, they're distant. Like they probably aren't as involved as like you and I could be because we're right in the street. But and so that's part of what we want to do is to reach out to rural areas and get those folks involved and show them that they have a voice. Because a phone call from Atoka weighs way more than a phone call from Oklahoma City when it comes to Speaker McCall.
Absolutely. Or, and I think it's important to note that there is rural representation on, both sides of the aisle.
Right.
Representative Copeland from Beggs, Oklahoma, which is
Population 1,000.
1,310 as of the 2010 census. Yeah, I know the population of Beggs, Oklahoma off the top of my head. How about them apples?
You just Googled it.
Well, they didn't know that. That's he's gonna be I think is kind of the heir presumptive to Scott Emmett as minority leader of the Democratic Caucus.
He's the caucus chair. Yeah.
He's from obviously a very small rural town, and answers I would suspect to probably a pretty similar constituency as Speaker McCall, but they find themselves on different sides of the aisle.
But the issues are the same, you know? And so, I think, so that was my takeaway from those conversations at the Capitol this week was that three very different people, one from Tulsa, and then a couple from here in Oklahoma City, and they all kind of said the same thing, was like, you know what, like they're just terrified of what these cuts look like. And I think everyone is conflicted. And I'll be honest, like I really empathize with the legislature.
Absolutely.
And what they're facing.
Like, so, I last night spoke with several of the members, and was pretty struck, I think, at their level of just. I'm trying to even think of what the best word, because it's part frustration, but it's not only frustration. It's part fatigue, but it's not only fatigue. It's I think they're at the end of their rope. I think that this is really starting to take a toll, which is one of the reasons I think that we may be seeing some movement. I mean, even as we speak, today on Thursday, the Senate passed Senate Resolution 1X, I think, 100X, that basically said, hey, the Senate supports including gross production tax as part of the proposed revenue package at 4%. Didn't specify the time frame, which is a little bit of an issue. Here in the last hour and a half or so, the House Democratic Caucus said, yeah, we totally agree. We're willing to talk about this as long as gross production tax at 4% for some amount of months is on the table as part of the revenue package. We're willing to have a conversation. I haven't heard from the House, or haven't seen anything come across the wire, and when I say wire, I mean Twitter, about what the House R's are thinking yet. John Eccles has made a statement saying he thinks it's something they can talk about. Senate JCAB is wrapping up right now, passing a series of measures of the so-called Plan B. This is just measures that would only take 51 votes that kind of reappropriate some funds. They repeal some tax exemptions, stuff that the majority can do on their own. But we are seeing, I think, for the real good or bad, we're seeing real movement for the first time in the extraordinary session, and I think that's why. I think they're feeling the heat.
Yeah, I agree. So right now, as we record this, the House JCAB is basically hearing the Plan B scenarios where they would be repealing some tax exemptions related to things we're already talking about, fuel and whatever. As I look at my Twitter feed while you're talking, I see that there's already questions about constitutionality. I don't really know what they're talking about. Feels like some kind of fuel issue, but that does make me nervous. So maybe right now, as we wind down, Scott, and we kind of face the end of our of this episode, it'll be exciting to see what happens this evening. I have to go to class. You've got to do whatever you got to do tonight. And we'll see what comes out of this JCAB meeting tonight. I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really, honestly, I hope that a week. Here's what I hope. I hope that it's not a week before we record another episode. I think if we get a budget deal, if something major happens, you'll hear from us an emergency pod, if you will. You'll hear from us between now and then. One thing we don't need to get into this at all, but just so that we're all kind of knowing. Or all on the same page. You've heard me mention a couple times presumptive Democratic minority leader, Representative Scott Inman of Del City, who has been the minority leader of the Democratic caucus for several years, has served 11 years in the state legislature, resigned his seat yesterday, and also has declared that he was no longer a candidate for the governor of the state of Oklahoma. He has cited some ongoing issues with his family. There's really not, I don't have any more information at that time. We're kind of watching media and reporters and talking to folks pretty closely to see if anything is breaking, but we haven't heard anything else at this point. So
no, you know what? Like, people's personal business is their personal business.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that it works out in your favor if you're running for office, but like, I'm more concerned with the fact that 200,000 Oklahomans might lose access to services.
No, I'm 100% with you. I just felt like it was because we've talked about Leader Inman and like his leadership of the caucus previously, and I've said a couple of times today, like, I think kind of insinuating that he's not really in the mix anymore. So I just felt like it's
he's not.
Yeah. So I just that's why is that
Right.
he's and he'll be resigning his seat effective January January 1. And and I think it's an important thing to bring up because he is has a very different leadership style than Representative Copeland. I don't know.
We see a shift in what this looks like for the Democratic Party.
I mean, I don't know if we will or not. Representative Copeland has come out and basically said, like, no, like her position is the same. It may look different, but it's the same. I don't know what it portends if anything for negotiations. But no matter who is at the table, my hope is that you're hearing from us on the pod sooner than next Thursday, because that should mean that we've got a deal. Which, as you said, a deal is good for just short of 250,000 people. Which is really what this is all about.
We'll see what happens and what gets passed. The clock is ticking.
Indeed. Andy, is there anything coming up with Let's Fix This? Do we have any events on the horizon?
That's right, Scott, there is. So a couple of things real quick before we wind down here. Don't forget, next Friday, November 3rd, is Bourbon, our fundraiser.
You have to come.
Scott is such a bully.
It's buns and bourbon. Like, who doesn't like buns and bourbon?
That sounds inappropriate. I like it. So here's...
I just heard it the way you heard it. Who doesn't like Asian steam buns prepared by Chef Che and bourbon?
He's not actually a chef, though. He's coming to this restaurant business. It's like secondary to him.
What do you call him? Cook Che?
Owner?
Daniel?
Che? Daniel? Yeah. So anyway, so if you would like to attend our fundraising event, we've been able to decrease ticket prices thanks to some of our generous sponsors. So it's Friday, November 3rd from 7 to 9 p.m. It's in the Paseo District, and that's the First Friday Art Walk. Several legislators will be there.
So if you want to meet with legislators, if you want to meet some of these folks, and you don't want to do it in the context of the Capitol Rotunda, you don't want to do it in their office when there's roll calls going on overhead, you're nervous about talking to them in that kind of a quote unquote formal setting, come meet them here.
Yeah, it's a good time. We'll have a pretty diverse crowd. It should be a good time. So tickets are on sale on our website, letsfixthisok.org. And you can get them there. There's a pop-up and a little banner for you to see that there. We would love to see you there. Also next week, we have a couple of other events. It's the week after. So also the week after Bourbon, the first full week in November, we have a couple of events. On Tuesday, November 7th, we have an event called Gearing Up for 2018. It is Let's Fix This and Oklahoma Watch and Women Lead Oklahoma. We're going to be talking about what to expect from 2018 as we go into the next legislative session.
The nihilist part of me wants to say nothing good,
right.
But the Let's Fix This part of me knows that there's always hope.
Always hope. So we're going to talk about how some issues like education and a few other things that have components in the local, the state, and the federal level. We'll talk about how you can get involved in those levels. And then on Thursday, November 9th, we're going to have our second West Wing watch party, which I know Scott's excited about.
I can't come. I'm so devastated.
Oh,
we're gonna be out of town, but you guys have to come.
It's a free event. It'll be at the Wheeler Ferris wheel.
God willing, it'll be cold.
Comfortable, but not frigid.
I'm always comfortable when I watch The West Wing.
Well, there's that. So anyway, November 7th, the What to Expect in 2018 at the Paramount in Oklahoma City, and then the West Wing watch party at the Wheeler Ferris wheel or Wheeler District on November 9th. And again, Bourbon on November 3rd. Tickets available. letsfixthisok.org. You can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at Let's Fix This OK. Andy, me, I'm at AndyOKC on Twitter. Scott,
I'm at SC Melson on Twitter. That's M like Mary, not N as in Nancy.
right. You can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/letsfixthisok. Our website, as I mentioned earlier, is letsfixthisok.org. And you can, in addition to buying tickets to Bourbon, you can sign up for our newsletter, read our blog, read some photos, and find details about other upcoming events like the ones we've mentioned, and resources. Find all that there. Our podcast is edited and produced by Scott and me, and we are a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network. Our theme music is provided by local heroes, your friends and mine, the Sugar-Free All-Stars. As a reminder, Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage in their government. We encourage you to get involved in any way you can, and remember, decisions are made by those who show up.